Good evening to everyone, good evening to the audience here at Spazju Kreattiv, and good evening to all those joining with us over Facebook. And I welcome you to this first Electronic Music Malta activity of the Spazju Kreattiv program for 2021. And we could not start with a better subject than this new project that we're launching, which is called Elektronika. And some might wonder, what is this going to be, a record label, or what is this going to be an event, you know, like a music or production event? So basically, this kicked off, this idea of this Elektronika project kicked off during Circuits 2020, when Mike Bugeja and myself, and there was also present Tony Sant at the time, we hosted a very interesting discussion, and I would say a voyage through the years of electronic music production in Malta throughout the years. And during that talk, which was in October of 2020, we hinted that we had the intention of setting something really solid and starting off an initiative by which we properly conduct research on the history of electronic music in Malta. And this project was born out of an initiative between the M3P Foundation, today being represented by Mike Bugeja and Dr. Tony Sant, and ourselves, Electronic Music Malta. And thankfully, we can say that as from November, we successfully managed to obtain the support of the Arts Council Malta, and obviously, I never stopped thanking also Spazju Kreattiv, who also then were willing partners, as they've always been since Electronic Music Malta was founded about 5 years ago. Basically, what we're going to do today is we are going to formally now talk about what Elektronika is about. Elektronika is going to start off as a period during which we will conduct research, during which we will be gathering all sorts of information about electronic music being produced in Malta or by Maltese or Godzitins abroad. So being produced in Malta, you might have artists from all around the world being here, or you might have artists who have collaborated with Maltese artists. So the scope might be quite wide, but always revolving around our Maltese nation, I'd say. Basically, today we are going to explain a bit about how this first stage of this project will start off with. I was saying that it's going to be a research period where we're going to collect the information, but this might then extend into other stages. Today, as you can see, this is a hybrid event. I think the crowd that is packing within the COVID limitations, this room here in Spazju Kreattiv, I can say that it was it would be an inverted commas a sellout. It was fully booked, so we thank everyone for the interest. And obviously, the rules will be that if anyone in the public would like to ask a question, we'd rather not pass on the microphone. So please either submit it inside the Facebook page or just talk to our collaborators at the back. I already advised the audience here to be a bit conscious about the cameras, but at the end of the discussion, we will be answering the questions. Also, today, with me, as I already hinted, we're going to have Mike Bugeja and Dr. Tony Sant, who are in charge of the research during this stage of Elektronika. But also with us, we will have also Kurt Buttigieg. Tony and Kurt will be joining us via Zoom. And we also have Justin Meli, also known as Sonny Tuseko, who we will be interviewing a bit. And obviously, at the end, we could not but ask Justin to provide us with a performance, a live set, which will end the night. So we hope to last the discussion for about up to about 7:30, we will stop a bit for a bit of a break until we set the stuff up for the final performance, which should take us around 20 past, 30 past, 8:30 in the evening. So I'll pass over to you, Mike. I've said enough. On to you to start talking a bit about this project.
Right, so thank you for the introduction, and thank you to everyone who decided to join us for this event today, for this discussion. What I'm going to talk about now is basically an update on what has been done so far since October, especially because Edwin just said the phase now is research, but obviously while we were discussing how we're going to go about this project, we started doing some groundwork already, obviously. And I'm going to go briefly through that, and just to give you an idea of what's been done so far. I don't know if any of you are users or browse the M3P website to check out what's going on there. It's a website that's dedicated to basically documenting and preserving the memory of the media as well, the music, all forms of art, really. And I'm sure that Dr. Tony Sant will be elaborating a bit on that once I hand over the mic to him as well. But we started with the project as working towards a historiography of electronic music in Malta, and then we followed up by giving it a name so we could brand it, and today we'll be getting more details about the branding as well. As of last October, the first event that was related to the project was the online discussion that we held here at Spazju Kreattiv. I have to say it was a very, very positive event, positive feedback that was received as well. In fact, after that, the first step was to collate all the feedback that we got and follow it up to see the people who gave us that feedback, how they could be involved or what they could do to help us with the project itself. I had started also making some calls for information gathering, for data gathering, because obviously this is a huge project. We're just talking about the electronic music genre here, but obviously the M3P website is covering all the genres in Malta and all the disciplines of art. So we chose to focus on the artists and people who are related to the electronic music scene. And after that, after we had started collating that information, I went ahead and did some one-to-one follow-ups with certain people who showed very positive interest to see how they could get involved. I see that Tony might want to add something here.
Not much at this point, Mike, except perhaps to really underline a point that you've already raised. And this is the method by which we're doing this research, which is to say, this is not us as the researchers simply, standing on a pedestal and looking down at things and observing what's going on. But this is an outreach exercise where this is collaborative research. And I think we'll hopefully have an opportunity to elaborate on this a little later, but I think it's essential that we emphasize and underline this point that this is collaborative research that you and I, along with Electronic Music Malta and the M3P Foundation, are doing it with the key stakeholders within the subject matter that we are indeed researching.
Right, so I'll move on then from what we worked on in October. Obviously, October was a bit of a short period because the event itself was towards the end of the month. So more work was carried out in November. And the first thing that we did was to create the Elektronika page, which I believe we can share with everyone on the screen, on the M3P website. The M3P website is m3p.com.mt, in case you didn't know about it and you want to check it out later. And after compiling the information in October and even before, I had started already some work before that myself, we compiled working lists. Now, when you go on the page that is dedicated to Elektronika on M3P, and you scroll down, you'll find a number of working lists. The longest one of these, if we scroll down the page, hold on, the working, all right. The working lists are on the main page. All right, sorry. So the working lists are.
So this is the M3P.
This is the.
This is very important. This is the m3p.com.mt website.
All right, the front page. I would like to go on the Elektronika page, though.
Some people ask, so to start interacting immediately, some people mistake this to be Wikipedia, because it's based on the technology of Wikipedia. No?
It is a wiki, really, and I will leave that to Tony later to elaborate as well, because he's more knowledgeable about wiki, being part and parcel of the community himself. But what we've done on the Elektronika page is to post working lists of artists, past and present, and also a number of venues. I'm sure that we haven't covered them all in the working list. There's a number of key people who we feel were important and essential to the introduction, to the development, and to the advancement of electronic music in Malta. Some of the names you'll find may not be that familiar because we don't normally see them in certain scenes of electronic music, but they have done a lot of work, especially in the 80s. And these lists were uploaded there with a purpose, so that people could add to them or ask about them or contribute information about them. This can be done by registering as a user on the M3P website, and after that you can start to contribute and post. Obviously, if you can substantiate that information that you share, it is always better than just, let's say, hearsay, because this is important. This is the aim of this project, in fact, is that eventually when it will never be finished, because there's always new artists coming up, so you always build on what there is. But the aim of it is to serve also for research purposes. So that is why we need the information to be correct and when it's posted there. And well, the lists have been actually developed further. I don't know if we can actually scroll down to the main page. Can we scroll all the way down?
So if you
and there's the Elektronika list.
There is a link there.
There's under projects. There's Elektronika.
Electronika. Yes, just
that's the one. Just so we know what we're talking about. So all the way down. There, list of Maltese electronic bands and artists. You'll see that we, for the first step, we've made the list and the years that they're directive and if they've had official releases. Beyond that list, you'll find that there's a list of key people, venues, I think record labels as well.
Yes. There are record labels.
And anyway, there's a lot of bands some of you might be familiar with, some of them you might not be. So that was the point of our focus in November, was to elaborate on this. And the red links are the ones that have no information posted yet. The blue links are the ones that if you click on them, they will lead you to a separate page, individual page for that artist or subject. So that was what we were doing in November. And December then, I started approaching more artists. Especially I tried to find contacts of people from the 80s, which a lot of them, unfortunately, are no longer active. And it was a bit of a challenge to manage to find the contacts for them, but we managed a few. And I also did a lot of internet mining for more info about them through social media, through a lot of Google searches, and trying to find all sorts of platforms of social media that they might be on. I also
Can I ask you a quick question to
Sure.
start? Have you managed to discover some? I know that you're quite fond of the 80s scene, but have you managed to discover some new acts, or or maybe some?
Not new acts per se. I mean, the acts that we knew had recorded something, but we didn't have the actual copy of the release.
Of their material.
But I did manage to talk to one of the members of Rafsi, for example. The other two seem to be no longer living in Malta, or Gozo, because Rafsi was actually a Gozotin project. But the only Maltese member of that project I managed to track down, thanks to Mark Abela, I will mention here. Mark Abela used to be in Extend.
Okay.
And well, he sent me some pictures. Hopefully he'll manage to find some recordings as well, but we'll have time to talk about that at a later follow-up, I suppose.
Nice.
What I did manage to get is a number of tapes, thanks to Alfie Fabri. Some of them are official recordings, some of them are bootlegs, but and there's been a first attempt at trying to convert them to see which tapes are in good working condition and which recordings we might need to actually doctor a bit, I suppose.
Exactly. I mean, as I was explaining a bit in the introduction, this is just a stage of the project. This is why we would like everyone who's listening and who will be listening to this discussion to please step forward if they know anyone who had a band, if they know anyone who literally had a project that never took off but still had good material. We are very, very much interested to map out that project, that person in this database that we're building, because this is the joy of this platform we're using, which is a simple but yet quite elaborate platform, I would say Wikipedia type of engine that we're using, in which we can also then open up more and more information. As you're saying, tapes are something that we would like eventually to transfer the media from tape to digital,
of course,
and then host them, and which is possibly something we could also talk about, how we shall be hosting the information.
Yes.
We know, and the music, because there is issue of copyright or
yes,
permission.
That's a whole project and the whole talk on its own, I think.
Exactly.
But we won't be going into that today.
But definitely during subsequent stages, we will be looking into restoring even tapes, not only of demos, but also of multi-track recordings of bands that there are albums that are still on multi-track, possibly in some of the original recording studios that were existent in the 80s, maybe,
yes,
that we might possibly be given, and we might have to redo a mix maybe and come up with something new. But anyway.
But
exciting
we're at the
stuff.
early stages so far, so we won't run that fast.
I
Tony,
can't wait for
I
that
see
period to
Tony
come.
smiling, so I'd like to have a comment from Tony back about this, because I know it interests him a lot.
Well, indeed. I mean, I think you alluded to this. I think you already alluded to this earlier, Mike, and which is the ultimate goal, if you will, in the sense that this will be an ongoing research project, in the sense that this won't be finished anytime soon. But we're hoping that within the coming months, we will have enough critical mass, so to speak, so that we are able to start doing things with this primary research. And I think we've given the ultimate goal, as a sense of where this is. I think it may also be useful to speak for a few seconds here about some of the next steps in terms of what you're doing. I mean, you've outlined, and I think you're going to continue outlining this preliminary work that you've been engaged with directly with the M3P wiki. But in terms of some of the things that happen next, and Edwin referred to this, the Wikipedia word keeps coming up. And so I think we should clarify here that the M3P wiki uses the same software that runs behind Wikipedia and other major wikis. And this is called MediaWiki. This enables us to work collaboratively. But the publishing platform at this point is the M3P wiki, which you've referred to as the M3P website at m3p.com.mt. The next step will be that once we have a substantial amount, we have a critical mass, as I called it just a few seconds ago. Once we have that critical mass, we will start transferring that verified data onto Wikidata, which is a wiki that is part of the infrastructure that Wikipedia works with more closely. And this eventually will give rise for us to work more systematically on publicizing some of this material through Wikipedia and perhaps even other channels. And this is where, of course, the copyrighted material comes in. And as you very rightly say, we'll definitely need to have a separate session about all that, mostly, of course, because first and foremost, we want to respect everyone's intellectual property. And this is not in any way an attempt to take advantage of anyone's intellectual property, but quite the contrary. We want to create a context from within which individual artists and individual creators can take advantage of their own intellectual property.
Okay, so that clears it up about Wiki and the Wiki connection then.
Exactly.
So going on to January. January was a month where there was a lot of data compilation and processing, posting to the M3P website, and we created a few pages that were not there related to the artists that we were meeting with. We mentioned Justin earlier, and Justin was one of the persons I approached for more information, and I will be doing so perhaps even more in depth eventually to develop those pages so other artists can see what we are aiming to collect online and in this website. And we also held a few meetings amongst us to discuss the way forward regarding boosting public interest and participation, which brings us to the month of February. Obviously, we're still at the beginning of February, so there's this second online discussion. And today we'll be launching, I think, officially the project and the website itself. Yes. And after this meeting, we'll be obviously looking forward to your feedback, and we'll evaluate that and take on board all the suggestions that you can give and contributions you can give so that this will indeed remain a collective effort. Now, the next step obviously depends on every one of you watching or listening. We need, as Tony said and as Edwin said earlier as well, to gather information. And when we say information, we mean photos, recordings. You know, bear in mind that your friend's father or your friend's mother could have been in an 80s band that was electronic, and you might not know about it. So it's important that these things, if you get to know about them, to let us know so we can follow them up as well ourselves and try to let them know how they can actually input that information themselves onto the M3P website. Remember that there is information that everybody knows, so you might think, oh, I don't need to tell them this because they might already know it. We don't care. You can tell us again. We don't mind listening to it 100 times because there's always something that we might have missed, especially when it's information that only the artist or the band knows, and the information that only very few persons know. There might be somebody who didn't want to let people know he was in a band after all, but we might still manage to convince them. And through research, we might find out information that nobody has ever got to know so far, but that's a tall order at the moment. Until we get through those first steps, we'll actually leave that till last. We're looking for, as I said, recordings, demos. They don't have to be official releases. They can be unreleased, bootleg studio recordings, garage recordings, live recordings, videos, newspaper, magazine cuttings, online links where you found information or where you think there is information that could be vital to this project. And obviously, we invite you to do this either by personal communication with us. There's details on the M3P page and also on the EMM website. And obviously, we want to have a look at anything that you can find that can lead us to bands that we don't know about, especially those that go back a few decades. It's all important to us. So every bit of information is important. And I'll end on that note.
And basically, one important thing to mention is the fact that as the years are rolling by,
Yes.
the different phases of the electronic music, I would say, culture in Malta, when it started evolving into also the entertainment aspect and the element of the new dance scene, the electronic dance music scene, and then the multitude, I would say, of electronic music producers originating from our islands and also releasing abroad, there is the aspect that always comes into my mind of the myriad of websites that we had, that were even forums or that were in various forms. Unfortunately, some of them being Flash-based, which we those that follow obviously the world of the internet know that Flash has recently been terminated as a platform, but I remember a couple of really artistically designed websites that hosted the electronic music culture, hosted a community of producers, hosted a community of DJs, and I would like even to possibly reach out to even those that had a platform, that have it still on their local computer, maybe because obviously the website was taken down or for some reason or another nothing happened. That even is relevant to us. I mean, it's not just the physical medium, but unfortunately now we are living in the eras where we have obviously we have the joys of the Wayback Machine that show us the websites as they used to look I would say now 20 years ago, possibly, but possibly if it was Flash, then it would be a different story. But please, I really would like even these sorts of I would say contributors to the electronic music scene to come forward, even if they still have a copy of their website on their local or some hard disk possibly, because obviously we constantly move and upgrade our PCs or move to Apple, and then everything's in a hard disk somewhere. But that is very relevant because we are living in an era when the internet now is over 20 years old, if not the internet obviously to the masses. And obviously we have waves and generations of producers that came forward. And to your point on the updating of the site, I have to say myself as an experience that I was following the works of the M3P Foundation from quite some time ago, from before the time that Electronic Music Malta was formed, and this is nothing but an extension of your, I would say, objectives as the M3P Foundation that has already, and Tony, maybe here you can elaborate, has already run similar projects on documenting the history of music in general, I would say, in Malta. Tony.
Yes, well, indeed, Edwin. I mean, this is a point that Michael raised earlier in terms of, the broad-ranging scope of what the M3P is about. It is no longer even just focused on the music scene, but the reason for this is we understand that other aspects of the art scene more broadly and culture as a human activity more widely, as well as, of course, the media specifically. Have a lot to bear on this. But I think the point that I would really, again, like to emphasize here is that in this way that we're working, the research sources are immediately accessible to everyone. And so this is not research we're doing and say perhaps 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, people will start seeing some of the material that's being gathered. No, everything that is being gathered is instantly and immediately made available to everyone. And this is, if I may go back to my very first comment this evening, is that this is a collaborative project. And this is what we mean. The intention here isn't for us to be doing something and for you to say, oh, look at what the M3P Foundation did, or look at what Electronic Music Malta did. The purpose here is for us to save these memories while we still can, while it's a living memory. And we have lost a number of stakeholders over the years relating to this scene specifically. We've experienced the same thing, for example, in a recent project we did with Spazju Kreattiv on their own art collection, for example, which again used a similar method through the M3P wiki. And has now resulted in a book that was published just a few months ago, or a couple of months ago, really now, about the Spazju Kreattiv art collection. So in a similar way, we want you to see the type of work that we're doing here involves you as much as it involves us. We can't do it without you. Well, and we need you to do it with us, because otherwise, if you could do it by yourself, we guess you would have already done it.
And to this point, in fact, I wanted to say that myself, I took the opportunity. I remember I attended some editathons, and I keyed in some information about the project that I used to obviously to perform in. And it's very simple, but obviously there is also a methodology. So in the future, we will be organizing definitely events where we will be explaining how one can fill in the information in a structured fashion and try to have, I would say, projects split rather than, for example, in my case, I had a couple of projects. I put them all in one exactly. Page, and ideally, if it's Semitic Groove Foundation, for example, it should be in its own page. If it's anything about our project in the 90s, web, it should be in another, not just Duo Blank would have everything in it. So that is an important concept and standard that even generally in similar platforms exist.
I'd like to add one more point before we move on to the next item on the program, which is when we talk about we're tracing electronic music in Malta, the history of and when it first surfaced in Malta, and how and who were the protagonists back then. We're not only referring to, perhaps we immediately go to the notion of electronic music as we know it, techno or ambient or house or whatever, but we have to also look beyond that. There's electronic elements in metal, there's electronic elements in reggae, in dub, there's in indie as well. So we have to also include these people as well. If they've got electronic elements in their music, we're interested for this particular project.
Exactly, and if it's a producer, if it's a sound engineer, that obviously recorded mainly metal bands, but still had quite, I would say, input from a sound design perspective, or from even just the methodology of the recording. That is quite interesting for us even to map out, especially, obviously, if it spans back years when there were challenges different than today. Obviously, today, production and recording is so much more available to the masses than it was earlier in those years. And as Tony was mentioning, we've lost, unfortunately, Tony Scott, who was one of the first recording engineers, for example. But thankfully, I can say that myself and Owen had the chance to speak at length with him about his the way he used to record whatever. But I'm conscious of time, and we need to move on to the next step, which is talking a bit to one of our guests, another guest over at Zoom, who is, I believe, based in Brussels at the moment, Kurt. Kurt, and Mike, on to you for
first of all, Kurt, hello. Can you hear me?
Hello, hi.
Hi, Kurt.
Feels very Eurovision. I feel like you're contacting Belgium and I have to give you the points, you know. Malta, no, come on. Yeah, here I am.
So, Kurt, we've had a few email exchanges ahead of this event today. So obviously, you know, I'm going to be talking to you about a number of things. Obviously, you've been involved in the local scene for a while, and you've focused, so to speak, on particular strands of electronic music, sound installations even. So perhaps you first like to give a rough idea to our listeners, our viewers, about your involvement in the scene, in electronic music, or what drew you to music in the first place.
I don't know, I think music is kind of always there, you know, like you go to a supermarket. So I think as an art form, it's one of the most accessible. And it's also something you can consume either as a group, like let's say if you go to a rave or something, or with headphones and just go into your own little world. And to me, that was kind of the attraction of it, that I could wear my headphones and be in a totally different world for at least, you know, the length of an album. It used to be 60 minutes, but it's much shorter now in general. Other than that, there's other elements which kind of drew me to different things. The fact that I'm more into experimental music than other stuff doesn't really mean that I exclude other stuff. I listen to a lot of, you know, like I was listening to Italian pop this morning from the 60s, and but it's more that I'm interested in timbre and in spaces and music, these kinds of things, and this is a type of music that offers them in spades. In general, also, I just really like to dig into things. So it's the same thing with this project. This is why I was interested in it. I like to dig into things and, you know, like to see where I get. And, you know, discovering experimental music and discovering this kind of world was really interesting. And it also got me in touch with a lot of different people from around the world. I mean, my first album was released by a label in New Zealand. And it's actually in the New Zealand National Library listed as a New Zealand album, even though I've never been there in my life. So it's, you don't really know where it's going to take you.
And what would you say was the main factor that got you into wanting to create your own productions or experiment with music, and in particular, electronic sounds?
I think in general, it was, I didn't want to make rock or anything of the sort. And I think you just kind of copy what you like, essentially, you know? I mean, that's the first step of any musician. They hear something, they make a very bad copy of it, and that was definitely my case. You know, I made an album which I'm not too happy with, but this is a point I'd really like to highlight, is that the importance of making something and having it out in the world is really important, because I think the temptation is obviously to say, no, I'll stay this off, I want a really good album, you know, and then 5 years, 10 years, 15 years pass, you have the best album the world has ever heard, but it's in your head. So I think having a physical object out there which has a space in the world is really important. And this is also something I'm doing with the label, because like, it's very good to have things on the Bandcamp which are digital only, because that way you get to hear them, but it's also important to have a physical artifact, because for one reason or another, I think as humans, we're drawn to something which has a physical presence, because that's the way music has always been. There has always been a physical presence. It's not necessary nowadays, but I think for a lot of people, it's still useful to have that kind of thing to latch onto.
Right, so I'm going to go to a different subject now, about the project itself. You said something about it already earlier, but after the first discussion, you were one of the first people and to give us your feedback. You gave us a lot of information about yourself, but also about things that you wanted to be involved with as well in this project. So what was it that after that event, that discussion, what was it that convinced you to want to be on board?
Essentially, I was happy that you were doing it and not I, because I always wanted to do it, but I never really, you know, like had the organization or the interest, or I don't know, but I was just happy someone was doing it, and I thought, okay, let me grab their coattails since they've already started it. Yeah, because otherwise I would have forgotten. So it's it's always good to do things immediately, but it's really important actually, because I don't know if you know, I mean, some people might know that in February 2020, I wrote an article for The Wire, the Global Year section, which kind of chronicles different scenes in different places. And it's already a historical artifact in the sense that it's already a time when there were certain, you know, like there was protests straight after Daphne was killed and certain things were happening. So there's already a window to see what society was like there, which I think is a really important element of history. That through music, it's not just the music that you're chronicling, but you're also chronicling everything around. You're seeing like what people, what their preoccupations were, what they were interested in, you know, like what the fashion of the day was. And it's a much wider scope, I think, than just speaking about music, you know. I think it's a really important, I think it's important that everything has a history, because certain things which are not important, you only notice that they're of utility 20 years later. You know, like I've been in jam sessions which were pretty interesting, but we didn't keep a copy. Or the first installation, you know, you mentioned the sound, I have no copy of it. It's on some hard disk, on some forgotten laptop. And these things are only maybe important when you look down the line. You know, when you look 20 years down the line, you think, okay, would have been nice to have some kind of artifact that you kept as a historical kind of thing. And it's also important for me, for newer generations and older generations to be able to work together, because sometimes they're doing work which is quite similar in scope, but they may not know of each other. You know, they might not know that someone was doing that a few years ago, and he might have some interesting insights and vice versa, you know? So that's why I think it's a really good job.
And you had mentioned to me as well when we were discussing the program for this event tonight that there were a couple of methods that you were in favor of. We mentioned that this is a collaborative project, and Tony said as well earlier. And I know that this is something that you're very much in line with. Definitely.
I mean, I can just tell you, because I can see a difference, because, you know, I've been in Belgium since I was 23, so it's been a while now. But I can see there's a different approach due to how small Malta is, in the sense that there's a lot of artists who are a bit uncomfortable to work with other artists and to have a scene which is well represented, because they feel this is going to impact them as an artist, and they say, you know, he's going to take my slice of the pie, he's going to take what I've been working for. But I don't think it works that way. I think the way it works is that when you elevate a scene, even if it's a scene of music which is quite similar, then everyone still finds his place. Because, like, let's say you have techno or whatever other style, you're still going to have someone who wants to do something more experimental, someone who's doing more kind of dub techno. I know Justin is there. You have someone else who's experimenting with textures, you know? So you can still find your place. And I think it's even more enriching for the artist that you come out of a scene like that rather than claim your exceptionalism, because then it means that you can really find your way as an artist rather than saying, okay, there's not a lot of techno artists, so there's like 15 of them, so I can be top dog. It's more interesting that you kind of work with the scene. I mean, just yesterday I went, because Complex Holiday releases a lot of cassettes. I was out of boxes, and I went to a squat here in Brussels, and it's punk and hardcore, so not really my scene. But just from that interaction, I got my boxes. The workshop next door fixes instruments. The workshop next door does screen printing. So there's a whole network there, and I think that's kind of one thing which I think in Malta we're kind of we're pushed to be competitive from a young age, and I think it doesn't always get results. I think collaboration works better. I mean, if you want to be competitive at the end of the collaboration, fine, but I think you have to start with the collaboration. You cannot start with the competition immediately.
It's a bit about the culture, you know, where you...
Well, I totally agree with what Kurt said here. It's always been about collaboration. You can do so much working together. Kurt, you mentioned the label, and I'd like you to give us a few pointers there. I know you mentioned it a bit earlier, but even for the benefit of our viewers as well, they might want to check out the Bandcamp site. There's quite a few releases now clocked up.
There's 5, I think. And we have some another 3 coming out in March. So I started it in 2020. So 2020 was a different, it was a particular year for a lot of people. I'm one of the lucky ones, because I was sent home from work and they didn't really know what to do with us for a couple of months. So it meant I had a lot of creative projects, amongst which was this label called Complex Holiday. I already had the name in my head, but Complex Holiday is a perfect name for what I was going through in the first lockdown. It was a complex holiday. So we release what can be called, we call it inside out ambient and sound art tomfoolery. But really it's based around experimental music, around tones, around things like that. So I started it, and nearly straight after I was joined by Robert Farrugia, who many might know because of his ambient work. And we work collaboratively from here and in Malta. We release mainly on cassette, and there's reasons for this. I mean, it's a good currency to swap with, and also postage is really expensive. So vinyl is really expensive to send, whereas cassette is easy to produce, send, and have it done. I also suspect a lot of people don't actually listen to formats like vinyl or cassette. I'm sure a lot of people are going to prove me wrong, and they're going to be very angry and saying, yes, of course I do. But I think a lot of people listen to the digital version and just leave the thing in its nice little, plastic and cellophane wrapping. Yeah, so there's no specific, it's not specifically focused on Malta as a label, but obviously there's a lot of things which are coming out now, which I think deserve to be documented. I mean, just yesterday I spoke to someone who's doing interesting things, vocal and ambient, and I didn't know of her before. It's only yesterday I discovered her. And I'm discovering a lot of different other avenues with the label. So it's a really useful exercise in many ways, not just to release. Actually, the releasing of tapes is actually the least interesting part of it.
At this stage, I'd like to ask for the Kurt's page on M3P to be on the screen. if possible, because Kurt, as of last October, when we mentioned already, you took a very strong interest in this project, and you were one of the first people to start contributing and uploading, posting information about yourself, about work that you're doing. What we see on the screen is the page that Kurt created by registering with m3p.com.mt and becoming a user. You can see that this page is a stub that always comes up. It's put there because obviously the page still needs to be developed further. And for the time being, Kurt has shared with us on the website that information that you see there, which links to the Einil With Them project, which is also on the Complex Holiday label that he was talking about just a few minutes ago, and other information, and there are external links further down. So this is how it starts. And before we go towards the end of this interview, Kurt, I'd like a comment from you about the process of registering and starting to input this information. How difficult or not or easy was it for you?
So it was difficult in the sense that I wrote the things, but then my computer crashed, so I had to do it again. But other than that, it was a breeze. I did the things in 15 minutes. I think the two things which scare most people, artists, labels, whoever, from doing this could be that it's time consuming. It's not, it took me 15 minutes. And it's also uncomfortable to speak about yourself. You know, you feel a bit pretentious and a bit uncomfortable saying what you did and what you didn't. But ultimately, I think it's the only way of getting people to kind of connect. I mean, unless there is a stub, unless there is something there, it's difficult to start. Also, it's not that you have to list everything and make something really complex. I mean, if you say like, this is a person who works in this kind of genre of music and has released these things, you know, and has appeared in this kind of project, that's already a start. I mean, what I did, and this is probably going to make Tony's hair stand on edge, is I opened the stub of something I like, pretended to edit it, then copy the thing, copy it to mine, and then changed everything. Because I'm not going to read anything or do it the right way. I'm just going to do the laziest way possible.
No, that's a good way of doing it. I see Tony giving you the thumbs up there. So you took the initiative of seeing what somebody else has done and going by it. We've all done it, to be honest.
Genius steals, huh?
Even myself, I mean, when I did
I mean, it's the obvious thing to do sometimes instead of having to communicate all the time with one of us, really, behind the website. Mostly, Tony gets most of that communication, that correspondence. So your way worked fine, as we could see from the page. It's all clear to see. As you said, the entry needs only have one line to begin with, and it becomes a stub, and you can come back to it and then develop it further. So the fact is, you said you were writing it and then it crashed. So I don't know if you were writing directly onto the website or writing on Word and then...
I should have copied it onto Notepad. I mean, that's the clever thing to do, but I didn't do the
Perhaps that's a good way of doing it. But I wanted to hear it from you about how you went about it for the benefit of our fellow viewers and the people present here.
It crashed, by the way, my laptop crashed because it didn't actually crash. I was stupid enough to leave it unplugged, you know, like it didn't have a power source and it ran out of juice. So it's my fault completely. I don't want people to think that they're running buggy software.
No, but it's good that they'll think of you now and remember to keep it plugged in when they're putting in their own entries.
It's plugged in, don't worry.
Right. So I thank you for your time, Kurt. I know you'll be following the rest of the discussion for sure. I'd like to see if Tony has something to add here.
The main thing to add here, if I may, Mike, is indeed to thank Kurt for his initial contribution and to, of course, encourage him to remain active. I think you mentioned a really significant point here, Kurt, in terms of writing about yourself. But yes, writing about yourself is one way of participating in this collaborative project. Another is to write about others who are not writing about themselves, or filling the gaps, perhaps, for others who who have not written some of the factual details perhaps that you know about, then these are facts. These aren't opinions about whether how good someone is or how successful someone is, but these are facts in terms of, for example, releases they've had or significant gigs, for example, that they've forgotten to list, that sort of thing. So the whole wiki is editable by anyone. And it is editable by anyone in a way that is tracked, of course. So if you were to go in and edit, I don't know, Edwin's profile page, simply because you remembered something or a collaborator he had that perhaps he forgot there, or to add a date perhaps that he didn't remember, this is tracked then back to you in the history page for each particular entry. So I thank you once again for your generous spirit, and I look forward to collaborating more with you, as well as with all sorts of other people who may have things to tell us about you and your work.
Thumbs up.
Yes, I mean, as Tony was saying, and this is the spirit. I mean, it's very simple to register to the site. It's very simple to start collaborating and to start contributing and adding more and more entries. And basically, this is the most important thing. Those who would like to contribute to this initiative, and one important aspect is that when we talk about the electronic music, the history of electronic music production in Malta, there are so many different, I would say, categories of contributors that come to mind.
Of course.
Besides just the producers themselves, or possibly the recording engineers, you have DJs that used to play. Even play electronic music in general in Malta, even way back in the 80s or possibly late 70s. Enthusiasts themselves who used to have collections and who used to bring the records. It was so laborious to bring the stuff and read about electronic music. We in the past years, the joy of Electronic Music Malta is we got to know about people like Mike Desira, for example, who built the first I would say modular synth by himself in Malta, but I'm quite sure that there are a couple of other, I would say, garage technicians who meddled around and built their own little devices, or maybe got a catalog and built, possibly, I remember in the 80s there was this Transcendent 2000, which was this keyboard that even this guy from New Order, Bernard Sumner, who had built, tried to build it, basically it didn't work. But these stories are very interesting stories that evolve around the various aspects of electronic music. Promoters, possibly budding promoters, or even journalists, so amateur journalists who had fanzines, possibly of local bands, or so. I mean, as Tony was saying, it's a massive. There's so much we can. Obviously, we don't have the time to do it in 6 months. If it's going to last for 6 months, it will be an ongoing effort. But please, the website is m3p.com.mt/electronica. We are present as Electronic Music Malta on the internet too. We are obviously in social media, and also in our two websites, electronicmusicmalta.org and circuitsmalta.com. But basically, whoever is interested might want to contact us first. So that
Sure.
we can explain a bit. There will be definitely other events where we will explain to those who would like to be prospective sort of contributors to this effort to explain a bit how the wiki engine works, how the M3P website works, to give a sort of tutorial about how to create a user and then update. But let's talk a bit about the next stages of the project. I mean, one of the, I would say, even important aspect that even the Arts Council told us, where will this project lead to? And definitely, as we alluded to in the beginning, this exercise we are going to do more of these interviews, live interviews with a performance in summer. So we'll have a program that will be happening next summer. Please watch this space, our space, basically on Facebook, and obviously all the other channels, when we will announce these other events that we will be holding. I know that yourself, Mike, are carrying out interviews at the moment.
Yes,
of a lot of
I'm
artists.
obviously going about my way, finding out people to talk to. to either get them to contribute themselves, and if possible, that is the best way, because one person can only do so much at a time. So if there's more hands on deck, the job gets done faster. And if the person is writing his own page, as Kurt did, they know, they obviously have a better insight to what the information that has to be shared is. And like Tony said as well, it could be that an artist leaves a detail out or whatever, or somebody who might have seen the artist perform and wanted to share something about that, that can be included as well. Over time, we've seen, thanks to platforms like YouTube, people uploading converted footage from events, and that's also very welcome, especially if it comes along with a short review of that event by the person. Exactly. From the memory. Of course, it depends on what state they were on the night to remember everything or not, but it helps. Every little bit helps. That's basically it. As you said, the project does not have an end date. Exactly. It's open-ended. It has a start date, which is roughly between October and now, and it's meant to keep going and growing.
Exactly. So we'll be having a couple of more events to the public where we will be featuring, we will be selecting possibly participants in it to interview. Obviously, we will be keeping you up to date about these in the future as we announce these. And obviously, this project will then continue to other stages. Now, this is obviously still something that's being thought up and being planned, but definitely this is why I continue to make a big, I would say, call for help and call for people to provide us as much as possible material, because then we can think about the future projects, which might be reissues of material, which might be concerts, which might be a book, which might be a TV series, who knows? And even people who have ideas about what we could do next, please don't feel free to talk to us about that. But let's, I would believe there were no questions from the public from on the internet, so we might proceed with interviewing and talking to our next guest.
So the next step, the next stage.
Our next guest, yes.
Right, obviously, those present here with us can see that Justin Maley is with us in the room, and before he goes to giving us this live performance, I've prepared a couple of questions. I've had the opportunity to interview Justin in the past. On my own radio show, but today we're just going to go for a few points that perhaps we can use as a follow-up to that, and eventually that information will crop up on the M3P page for, well, in this case we're seeing the Sonnet to Sacco page. There is actually a Justin Maley page as well that links to all of them. And this is one way that the M3P website works, by the way. When you start feeding information, if in this case Justin has a page under his real name, but we know that Justin has had a number of projects that he's in. So when you're feeding that information in, you can actually create a link to that project, and automatically, once you put the right characters, which are available also in the help section, etc., on the left-hand side there, that automatically creates a space for that artist. So you can see, like, there's a silence of space, ipconfig, cvgate, maybe ask you all for silence, and GLAM. You see GLAM is still in red, so GLAM has been linked, but there's no info inputted. Every other one of the ones in blue have had at least one sentence inputted, just so that it can be a stub and people can continue to build on that, or maybe Justin himself eventually. So, but I'll focus on Justin now. So, first of all, thank you for being with us, Justin.
Thanks for the invite.
I'd like to get from you a comment of how you perceived the Maltese electronic music scene when you first got interested in that scene and that sound, and then eventually got involved yourself.
I was interested, I think, from the early days of the techno scene in Malta, from the 90s. At that time, there were only a couple of local producers, like Edwin and Frank and Owen and Brian. But the techno scene was quite large at that time.
Large as in protagonists or large as in following?
No, following.
The following was because artist-wise, I think
Yes,
it was still
quite,
emerging, no?
It was quite small. I was a follower for a lot of time, and by time, even myself, I got a bit out of it. But later on, in I think in mid 2000s, I started getting involved more. I made friends with the Pink Pube niche, like people like Fabio, Chris, Stanley, Kari, Danieli. And I think with them, we started experimenting with production, everyone for himself.
So it was a matter of experimenting that got you into it.
Yes. I experimented earlier with software, but it wasn't I never released anything.
But I think it was when Pink Pube came along that gave you the first
yes.
push, no, to release something then.
In the 2000s, there were smaller niches in Malta. I think the techno scene was still there, but there were others like Cubic, who were making events and even producing different kinds of electronic music, like electro, IDM, and there were people like Mutex, like Microlit, like sound synthesis, like Shah and Acidulant. That was the Vgura niche. I was also involved with them.
Okay, this is interesting. This might be something we'll need to get into, I think, outside of this event as well, and then capture it by way of the M3P website, because these niches obviously contributed to then a bit of the competition came in there a bit. So obviously that helps to populate the number of artists as well, to increase.
There was a big competition between the cubic scene, the electro scene, and the techno scene, the Disorder and the others at the time. And Pink Pube was more experimental than Cubic or the other stuff.
And this was something that appealed to you more than the other sounds, the other genres,
yes.
the experimental side.
And it was a net label at the time. I think it was the first net label that we had in Malta.
Possibly, yes.
And we're releasing Maltese electronic music as experimental as it can be, techno, noise, ambient.
So I'd like to mention something about Pink Pube here, because I've been trying to get the people who were involved in Pink Pube to kind of bring that information back online. There was a great website. It was all free to download music. I believe there were some foreign acts as well, apart from Maltese, mostly Maltese. But
I think the foreign acts were still somewhat connected to Malta.
Even if they were foreign, okay.
Yes.
So somehow, but unfortunately, the website Pink Pube itself has disappeared. I know that Kurt, who we spoke to earlier, is involved in an NGO that has basically emerged from the ashes of Pink Pube. I think it's called Arshan Hour or something like that.
Yes.
And then there is a Facebook page for it, so you might want to get in touch with them if you want to encourage them to perhaps revive the Pink Pube web presence that we used to have, because there's a lot of music there that could be lost if it's not uploaded again somehow. But we'll have to work on that, I think, in a separate initiative. But back to Justin. What made you prefer the techno and ambient music over the other electronic genres that were also surfacing at the time in Malta?
I think techno was always, I don't know, it appealed to me. It was liberating at the time. It was something new in the 90s. And it was a way to express yourself. Then I got more into the ambient stuff. I started listening to people like Aphex Twin, Noteker, Biosphere. But also I was listening to a lot of post-rock stuff like Godspeed Black Emperor, and even shoegaze like My Ballad of Valentine and stuff.
Okay, so
And
that kind of noise, that kind of
yes, yes.
wall of sound as well.
And Coil and Robin Gristle. Those, I wanted to start producing something that incorporated everything, but it wasn't possible. So that's why
You focused elsewhere.
I had many projects, different projects.
And in fact, about these projects, there's a few. I mean, we've mentioned them. I think we might have covered them all in that list. I'm not sure if there's a one that I might have missed.
Yes, not all. They aren't all.
They aren't all.
There are some that I never released the name of. No one knows.
Under no name, or
they are unknown.
all right.
Still in
That,
his hardest.
that might be a challenge for me to get
It's something
out of them,
the
actually,
techno
but,
people do.
we'll have to work on that. A bit of torture or something. But perhaps a word about these different projects. Why did you feel it necessary to have so many different projects? Because if you were more interested in a certain sound, in certain particular elements of electronic music, all of them have something a bit different from the other here.
Yes. By far, I think the main project was always Sonata Seco, but people associated that with dub techno. So everything I released had to have that sound, those chords, those deep sounds, or else it would lose interest. So I had different projects for different style of techno, for
So
different
each
type.
project has a different style,
Yes,
basically.
it may be slightly, but yes.
But always related, obviously, to electronic music and
May we ask you all for silence had guitars
guitars
and
as well, yes, obviously. That was a bit
it was
crossover. It was over crossover project, I believe.
it was more of a
So,
metal
but there
band.
was a release as well for that
Yes,
as
yes.
well. I believe, was it also on Pink Pew?
Yes, it was on Pink Pube.
On Pink Pew as well, okay. So, mentioning Pink Pew, you were not only friends with Pink Pew, I think you were involved quite a bit
Yes,
as
I
well
was.
in that label itself. And further to that, a few years back, you launched a new label, Har Records,
Yes.
with Infinite Dub, I believe. Right?
Yes, yes, it was with Infinite Dub.
How important do you think Pink Pube was to the electronic music scene at the time? And what was it that attracted you to the idea of forming a new label now, once Pink Pube had stopped, basically?
I think at the time, not having a net label was quite lacking, and it opened up opportunities, like for all the artists that release music local. For example, Sonata Seco was launched there, and people got to know about Sonata Seco from there. Even, I think Silent Season, a label from British Columbia, got to know about Sonata Seco from there. So it was, for me, it was quite important.
For you, definitely, it was very important.
And even as a collection, like there wasn't M3P. At the time, there was Pink Pube. It had a blog. It was like a collection of local.
It was obviously it was doing what M3P is trying to do, perhaps on a wider level, on a
Yes.
on a bigger spectrum, so to speak. But obviously, at the time, Pink Pube was focusing only on a particular area of the electronic
Yes.
music scene in Malta. Okay. And what about Har Records then?
Har Records was we intended to do a vinyl-only label for my music and for Anthony's music. But we also started releasing digital music. We have two large compilations. One was in memory of Microlit, which ones were for Elektronika Malta. And the other one was to launch the label for the sound of the label. That's basically
All
it.
right. So, but eventually you'll be hoping to release
And
more
we have one vinyl release. I have a lot of releases ready for the label.
for.
but slowly they will see.
Okay, so that's something to look forward to as well as it develops. Is there any particular plan for this year on your part, or any of those projects, or just maybe Sonic Echo?
I want to build up a studio again because I moved houses, and now I want to build a new home studio, and yeah, hopefully the release.
So the main plan is the studio, and then after that there'll be
the releases I have stacked up, the new album that has been there for quite some time now, maybe.
I believe we had spoken about this when we did the radio interview as well, that there was this album in the pipeline. So I hope it manages to surface, maybe if not this year, hopefully early next year, and the studio will be up and running. So I have nothing to add, I mean, unless there's something else you need to add. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk again in the future at some event like this, or perhaps on another radio interview.
And obviously today we will have the opportunity to listen to this material, Justin, no?
Yes, mainly
Okay,
the stuff will be from this new album, but
Okay.
also some other stuff.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Well, from my end, I'd say I'd like to conclude this part of this activity, the discussion and the presentation part and the interviewing part. But before concluding, I would not like to forget a lot of people and entities to thank. First and foremost, I'd like to thank, obviously, Mike and Tony, who are instrumental to make this project a reality as the M3P Foundation. So a big thank you. Thank you, Tony, over there from the UK. How is it, the weather here? We have summer. Over there, I think it's still...
Well, when it's wet because it's raining. So no, it's as you would expect it for an early February day in England.
So you wouldn't believe in Malta as usual that it's winter. We are. Frank was saying it's summer.
We didn't ask Kurt about that, actually.
How's the weather, Kurt, over there?
Well, here it's tropical, you know, we have 40 degrees in the shade. No, it's the same like Tony, unfortunately. So shut up about it being nice, because we haven't had the sun in a really long time, and we need some vitamin D, some real vitamin D.
So a big thank you to Tony and to Kurt. Obviously, any final comments from you guys in conclusion? You know?
Kurt?
I'd say just do it, because it just takes 15 minutes to do. So between doing one thing and another, I mean, it's not going to take you more than 15 minutes. Just put a little stub about the project you're on, or something you know about, or something you remember. And it's already a start, you know, it's already a big deal, even those 15 minutes. I mean, what are you going to do in 15 minutes? So.
Yeah. And you go back to it eventually to keep building it up. That's the most important.
Yes, definitely.
That's very important, which I'm sure Tony was about to tell you as well now. Tony, comment?
Yes, indeed, but not just that. Well, thank you, Kurt. I've already said that, but I think more significantly, my hope is that we've piqued people's interest enough. I mean, people who are watching this, you who may be watching this right now and have been watching this for the past hour or so, that we've piqued your interest enough to participate in this research project. Even we're interested in people who have memories here. Yeah, so even if you're not a musician necessarily, or a producer or what have you, but if you've attended gigs, if you knew someone as a friend who was active as a producer, as a musician in the 80s and the 90s, even into the noughties and so on, please do get in touch with us. We will continue doing this on a regular basis, and I'm sure Michael and Edwin will have more to say about this in their closing words.
Yes, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Kurt, for closing comments. I would like to thank the Arts Council Malta and Spazju Kreattiv, who are making this project also a reality by supporting us in various ways. I would like to thank, as you're seeing as an audience there, that we're making this a reality in live stream. So I would like to thank whoever is contributing to make this a reality. Mark Dingley, who was also a partner with us during circuits, thanks for your expertise and obviously for making this possible. Frank and Owen, who are supporting us on the audio part and also on the Zoom managing, Charlon, who is supporting us, and all at Spazju Kreattiv to helping us host, being hosted here in this great place, this art space here, Spazju Kreattiv. I would like to thank everyone who is here, who is already giving us a big push. Thank you for coming. Thank you for already showing us that you are here to support us. We are both two organizations that are voluntarily based, so both as M3P and both as Electronic Music Malta, or as we like to call it, EMM. We are voluntary organizations, so please support us in any way by giving us even your suggestions, by becoming members in the case of EMM, and obviously we are very keen to receive any suggestions and comments from your end. And obviously I would not like to forget the artists themselves that keep on approaching us, that keep on also asking us questions. So please, as I'm saying, this not necessarily those that are watching live, those that will be having the opportunity to watch this on demand, please contribute. And if you have any questions on the site, on how it works, definitely give us feedback, and if we need to organize some events to support that, we will definitely do so. But watch this space, because we have other events coming in the future.
Right. The only thing I need to add to that is we look forward to having you all on board, so get in touch.
Yes. Okay, so this closes this part of this event. We will be going offline. We'll still be online, but we will be making our preparations for the performance, for the live set from Justin. So stay there. We are still online. We will just going to make some quick adjustments, and in a couple of minutes we'll be back online. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And please stay there.